One day I decided I wanted to legitimately catch every single Pokemon in Pokemon Emerald version, Living Deck style. To the outsider, this might seem like your run-of-the-mill average video game task, but to a Pokemon player, however, we know just how difficult that is. The very first thing I did was create a list to see if it was even possible in the first place. There are 7 interactable games in Generation 3, and I just wanted to see how much of a role each game played in the process. Creating this sheet helped me organize every Pokemon into one of 6 categories. Category number 1 are the normal Pokemon. These Pokemon are vastly accessible. Whether you're playing a Hoenn game or a Kanto game, you're going to find these Pokemon here. This category contains a whopping 323 individual Pokemon, or roughly 84% of the total. Category number 2 are the version exclusives. These are slightly more rare and only qualify for a relatively small percentage of the total. Version exclusives are basically Pokemon that are found in one of the 5 games only, but are relatively easy to get in those games. And this category makes up for about 15% of the total. The remaining 1% of the Pokedex is the following 4 categories. Category number 3 is the GameCube gang. There are some Pokemon like the Johto starters and the legendary beasts that would be much more time consuming to get without the help of Colosseum or XD Gale of Darkness, but not only that, out of all 7 games, the only way of getting Ho-Oh is through Colosseum, and the only way of getting Lugia is through XD. Category number 4 is Jirachi. The dude is in its own category because the only way you can get the Wish Pokemon is through an exclusive disc. We'll get there later. Category number 5 is Celebi, and this Pokemon also has its own category because it's also only available through an exclusive disc. This one is much crazier than Jirachi though, so stick around to see the crud I had to go through to do this one. Number 6. The final category is the missed events. While Pokemon events are incredibly memorable, they're also incredibly rare. In Emerald, there were 2 events that if you simply weren't there for in 2005, you just would never be able to do them again. But don't worry, we'll still tackle them in this video. Starting with the first category, I filtered my spreadsheet to see the Pokemon that were found in Emerald. Since Emerald has the biggest chunk of the Pokedex available, I figured it was a good place to start. So I went from route to route to route, catching all of the unique Pokemon that were relatively easy to find. And then I started Fire Red and did the same exact thing. Beat the game, went from route to route to route, caught every single Pokemon I could get. Then I started my playthrough of Leaf Green and did the same thing. I beat the game, but this time I got all those pesky exclusives that weren't in Fire Red. That's when I found this quote from Mr. Fuji that really meant a lot to me. Techno, your Pokédex quest is one that requires strong dedication. Without deep love for Pokémon, your quest may fail. I felt like he was literally speaking to me. Yes, Mr. Fuji, I do have a deep love for Pokemon, and I will complete this Pokédex quest. Once I beat the game, I took everything from my Emerald profile and everything from my Fire Red profile and traded it over to my Leaf Green profile. You know, just to have all my resources in one spot. I knew I had a lot of EXP grinding and evolving ahead of me, and also at the same time I was working on some Fire Red and Leaf Green videos, you know, fainting 2 Pidgey with 1 rock throw if you catch my drift. So I decided to take this as the opportunity to finally grind out the Lucky Egg process. For those of you unfamiliar with the Lucky Egg, it's a very rare item in Generation 3. It's a 1 in 1,886 chance. It's really hard to get. What it does is speeds up the experience growth of a Pokemon, thus making evolving a little bit quicker. So after 8 hours of grinding, I was finally able to get a Lucky Egg and start grinding the experience. The very next day, literally the next day, I turned on my Leaf Green profile, just like I did every single day before that, and was greeted with this sickening message. The save file has been deleted. My heart sank. In all my years of playing these games, I have never seen this message. And after a little bit of research, it turns out, yeah, it can happen. Sometimes you can fix it with just a little bit of cleaning on the cartridge, and sometimes you have my luck. Believe it or not, I found a professional GBA cartridge repairman online, and I sent in, with all the hope in my soul, my Leaf Green copy to some random stranger online. After a few anxious days, he did get back to me and he deemed my file unsavable. But he was luckily able to repair the cartridge so I could play it again if I wanted to. Shout out to Reddit user BellBandy561. He was very speedy, informative, and respectful, and just really made me feel at ease with this whole process. The dude is an absolute machine, and honestly his costs are very low. I recommend it if you're in the US. Anyways, when I got my leaf green back, not only did I lose all of the data that I had saved, but that includes 220 Pokemon that I had just spent 120 hours catching, trading, sorting, and all that jazz. Amongst them being my original starters, my legendaries that I had captured, and most importantly, the dang lucky egg that I just worked so hard to get the day before. With Mr. Fuji's message in my mind, I pushed forward because the dude wasn't kidding. I really did need a strong dedication and love for Pokemon to get through this. So I beat Emerald again, I beat Fire Red again, and lastly, I beat Leaf Green again. Oh, and I still needed that lucky egg, so after a 9-hour grind this time, I got it once more. After 100 hours of grinding, I was finally back to where I was before the incident. This time I decided trading between the games hundreds of times was inefficient and time-consuming, so I looked towards an alternative. Something that's been on my mind for a very long time. Something that I was too afraid to pull the trigger on because of the intimidating price tag. I think you know what I'm talking about, don't you? No true fanatic is complete without his very own copy of Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire. I've been planning on getting this game eventually anyways, but I figured with all the trading between Gen 3 right now, there's no better time to do it than this moment. So I bit the bullet and spent $1,700 on this bad boy. And let me tell you, it is the MVP on this next completion mission here. I don't know if I'm going to say it was worth $1,700, but I will say that I don't regret it at all. All I had to do was just not eat for like a month. It was no big deal. Pokemon Box makes transferring Pokemon between Generation 3 games a breeze. For example, if I were to trade 100 Pokemon from Emerald to Leaf Green, it would take somewhere between 5 and 10 hours of work. But with Pokemon Box, it only takes 2 minutes. And trust me, I was transferring more than 100 Pokemon quite often. If you're interested in learning more about Pokemon Box, I'm actually going to release a very detailed and in-depth review on the game soon. I'll put a link to the video in the description there in case you're interested. In my final 9% of the Pokedex, I ran into another roadblock. This time it's my fault, because I'm a bit of a klutz. I accidentally dropped my DS, and not only did it damage the DS, but it also damaged the capture card that I have installed. Which means I can't record any footage. If I can't record any footage, well, this video wouldn't exist. And at the same time, I was also working on Fire Red and Leaf Green guides, which means I had to pause those too. Without hesitation, I ran over to my local retro game store, shout out to Cybertron Games in Orlando, Florida, and I bought another DS. This one was a little banged up, but it only cost 80 bucks. Then I had to buy the capture card, so I shipped this bad boy off in the mail to the guy I've been using for a decade. Knowing that it could be another month till I got that DS back, I decided to start another category. At this point in the mission, I was a little torn on which direction to go, because you see categories 3, 4, and 5 are all related in a pretty special way. Remember how I mentioned earlier that Celebi was really difficult to get a hold of? Here's why. Like I said before, Celebi was only available through an exclusive bonus disc that was used to celebrate the release of Pokemon Colosseum in Japan. There is a catch though. To redeem this Celebi, you need to have beaten Pokemon Colosseum in Japanese. And you can't do that without a Japanese GameCube, and you also need to transfer it to a Japanese copy of Ruby and Sapphire. I had a lot of work ahead of me. That's right, for me to get only Celebi, I'll need a Japanese GameCube, Sapphire, Colosseum, and bonus disc, as well as 100% complete Colosseum and Enter the Hall of Fame in Sapphire. This was a lot of work ahead of me. Technically speaking, I didn't really need to beat Colosseum in English at all, because all of the stuff I needed from that is also on the Japanese copy, so that's where I started. Once I got all the components ready, I attempted to beat a game in a language I didn't even know a fraction of. It can't be that hard, I suppose. It is a Pokemon game after all. let's power on this bad boy, and... no. Yeah, maybe this was going to be harder than I made it out to be. I attempted to search online for translator apps that could translate the image from my gameplay live, and while it sort of worked, it was never really an actual solution. There was just too much going on the screen at the same time, and most of the time it was completely illegible. It's been a long time since I've beaten this game, maybe 8 or 9 years to say the least, and let me tell you, even after 27 years of Pokemon battling, Pokemon Colosseum really puts your skills to the test. This game is not easy. It does require a little bit of intuition too. It doesn't guide you from point to point, so you even need to speak to certain NPCs to trigger the next events in the game. It's really hard to do when you don't understand a single word that's being said to you. I'll talk about Colosseum another day, trust me, but I did end up catching all 48 Shadow Pokemon and purifying them legitimately by visiting the Deep Colosseum and grinding over and over and over again until I had enough precious cash, to which I went over to Agate Village and bought some scents and then purified the Pokemon en masse. It actually got to the point where I could recognize certain items in my bag or moves on a Pokemon, like, hey, Ampharos knows this electric type move that's 95 power and 15 PP. That's Thunderbolt. If I ever did get stuck, I would just go ahead and Bulbapedia, search the name of a Revive, for instance, and then look at the Japanese text and compare it to whatever was in my bag just to see if I could find it there. It took a little bit of time getting used to, but I'm a smart lava cookie. After all the Pokemon were purified, I next had to beat my Japanese copy of Sapphire, to which I traded over my starter to my English copy of Emerald. Trained it all the way up to level 60, and then traded it back to Sapphire. With my overleveled starter, I was able to cut every corner and skip every trainer I could, and beat the game in just under 4 hours. This game I know like the back of my hand, no translations needed. With 48 hours invested in both Sapphire and Colosseum, I was finally able to boot up the Celebi bonus disc. This was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. It felt like I was truly special, experiencing something that had been a playground rumor growing up with, especially after working so hard to get here. Listed in the description of this video will be a review on the Celebi bonus disc and all of its features. Celebi had joined my party in the Japanese Sapphire, and then I just traded it over to Emerald, and let me tell you, it was surreal seeing a legitimate Celebi in a Generation 3 game. I was floating on Cloud 9 for like 2 whole days after that, trust me, I wouldn't shut up about it. Well, after that is where it got a little torn, because technically, yes, I could get everything I needed from the Japanese Colosseum. But I'm a perfectionist. I wanted my special Ho-Oh and all the other Pokemon that Colosseum makes accessible to be in English. So, you know what I did next, right? You could see it in my eyes, can't you? That's right, I decided to beat Pokemon Colosseum in English just after I did it in Japanese. Again, 100% completed. So that's what I did. This time I brought out the Nintendo Wii because the difference in resolution is night and day. And with this new crystal clear 720p view I had, I beat Colosseum again. And as you can expect, I caught and purified every single Pokemon. What was next on my list, though, was this guy, Ho-Oh. To get Ho-Oh, not only do you need to purify every single Shadow Pokemon, but you also need to take on Mount Battle. Speaking basics, you just need to beat 100 trainers in a row without losing. But as a kid, this was always super intimidating, so I just never really did it. But now, I'm a grown man-child, and I decided it's finally time. I had heard online that Mount Battle isn't that hard, relatively speaking, but I figured I'm going to take on the Battle Frontier eventually, so this is a good chance for me to IV breed and EV train 6 individual Pokemon, which I did. In fact, I even went the extra mile, unnecessarily, I'll admit, and got myself an Eon ticket, which will help me get a near-perfect Latios. For those of you who are interested in seeing the Southern Island event, I'm going to go ahead and make a video about that, and I'll link it in the description when the time comes. This took a good 30 hours or so to do, but it was totally worth it, because this team destroyed Mount Battle. I mean it. Out of 100 battles, where I chose 4 Pokemon each battle, I only had 5 Pokemon faint, and 2 of them were to my own Earthquake. What I read online was true. You don't need to IV breed or EV train any Pokemon for this. The team you used to complete Colosseum was well enough equipped to handle this. Regardless, I made it up to the top and took on the final boss, who did get a lucky focus band trigger in there, but this powerhouse team took the victory for me. And to commemorate the occasion, Ho-Oh swooped down and joined my party. Just like that. A little anticlimactic, I'd say, but that's what happened. I was now able to trade Pokemon over to Emerald, Pokemon that I was missing, like Umbreon and Espeon, the Legendary Beast, the Johto starters, and a few others. Next, and similar to Celebi, was my favorite mythical Pokemon, Jirachi. Jirachi is also only available through an exclusive bonus disc to celebrate the release of Pokemon Colosseum in English. But this one is child's play in comparison, because you don't even need to own Colosseum to get this Jirachi. It's incredible. It is a hefty cost, but regardless, I got it anyways. This was also something I never got to experience growing up, despite hearing about it on the playground all the time as a kid. I powered up the bonus disc and was greeted by the Wish Pokemon Jirachi. Even though it was very simple, straightforward, and anticlimactic, it still didn't take away from it being a very magical and exclusive feeling for me. I was very happy to do it. Now, you can't redeem Jirachi on Emerald, but you can on Ruby and Sapphire, so I cranked up both copies and redeemed myself 2 separate Jirachi. If you're interested in learning more about the Jirachi bonus disc, again, I'm going to upload a video much later, and I'll include it in the description when I do. That will show the entire disc and all of its contents without my narration this time. At this point, I was 374 out of 386 of the way completed, and this was the very first time that I felt like I was approaching the finish line. And next on my list was Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, a game that's been sitting in my library since I was 13 years old, and I never really had the courage to play. But that's in the past now, gosh darn it, because I'm in my 30s and it's time I play this Pokemon game like a man. I revved up the old Wii again and was greeted by a pretty dark title screen. I was in for a treat. One day I'll review how I felt about this game in depth, but wow. After just beating Colosseum before this, XD is definitely the easier game, but it's also objectively the better game. There are so many quality of life changes, something as simple as being able to save on the go and also having more than 3 PC boxes, but the list goes on. I had a really great time playing this game. And spoiler alert, obviously, in case you missed it, the final boss is Shadow Lugia, and I'm just now realizing 20 years after release how weird it is that Lugia got an alternate form a gen later in a GameCube game. It's pretty trippy, actually. Purifying Lugia was really interesting, because this Lugia is supposed to be unpurifiable, so it naturally acts a little bit different. You have to use this thing called the Purify Chamber, which you need to organize Pokemon that you have in a type advantage perfect circle, which sounds a lot easier than it really is because you have to do this 9 times and you really don't have a lot of resources. Regardless, once you finish it, you can place Lugia in the center and it will become purified automatically. Well, I finally did it. After all these years, I was finally able to transfer a Lugia to Pokemon Emerald. And I was in awe at the beautiful sprite that I've never gotten to see in the actual game before. There were only a few odd Pokemon left at this point that had escaped my captures. Pokemon like Slowking and Steelix, which were both trade evolutions, Pokemon like Smoochum and Tyrogue, which were both hatch encounters, that kind of stuff. But eventually, I got to the last 2 Pokemon. Category 6, the Mythics. Now, Deoxys and Mew are both technically impossible to get nowadays because the events from those days have long passed. I mean, seriously, just look how hard it was to get an event back before the days of the internet. The Deoxys event took place only in 3 physical locations in 2004 for 1 day each. If you didn't get to go to them, you didn't get a Deoxys. And being in middle school in Southern California, where the nearest Deoxys event was 1,200 miles away, you could probably imagine I didn't have much pull with my parents getting this. So, as a result, I just never got to experience the Gen 3 events like many other kids. Well, we're in 2024 now, baby, and means of experiencing these events have resurfaced online. For instance, the original distribution carts that they used on those events have leaked online, and you could just have a flashcard and download the event. But that kind of feels like cheating, and I'm really trying to do this mission as authentic as possible. Another way of experiencing this event has recently come to light. Something that also feels like cheating, but to a lesser extent simply because there's no external unlicensed hardware used. It's a bit of a complicated glitch that Gen 3 experts are dabbling in lately, but it should be able to give me the items that trigger these events. So the plan was to get me the Aurora ticket for Deoxys and the Old Sea map for Mew. This did still feel kinda dirty to me because I'm kind of a goody-goody two-shoes, but there's literally no other option. I had to do it. So, following a guide online, I was able to pull off the very complicated code execution that got me the Aurora ticket. I actually did this on my second Emerald profile because my first profile, as you know, is so close to completion, and this glitch has tendencies to corrupt data. With the Aurora ticket in hand, I visited Lilycove City's dock and spoke to the sailor. He was very excited to take me to Birth Island, to which I climbed up the steps to interact with this strange triangular shard in the center of the island. I had heard about this event, but I've never seen it with my own two eyes. And here it was, after all these years, right in my hands. After interacting with the shard, it would move around the island playfully. I didn't quite know what I was doing wrong because sometimes it would reset to the center, but then I figured out that I'm supposed to interact with the side of the shard that's facing the center of the island. And once you do this, it progressively gets redder and redder and redder and redder and redder until it bursts and Deoxys attacks. Man, this was surreal. And after a lengthy back and forth, I was finally able to capture the DNA Pokemon and add it to the roster. One left. Now, originally the plan was to execute the same glitch that got me Deoxys, but this time for the Old Sea map for Mew. But somehow, the stars of the cosmos aligned. And by scrolling the Emerald subreddit, I saw this post. An advertisement someone saw of a local retro game shop that is hosting a traditional Gen 3 Mew event for 1 weekend only. I could not believe it. What are the chances of this? I mean, literally. A Gen 3 event in 2024? The Mew event specifically. And right when I just finished Deoxys, and this is the last Pokemon I need, it's incredible timing. One problem though. This retro game store was in Texas, and I'm in Florida. So for reference, that's a 17-hour drive away. And while financially it would probably make more sense for me to just do the glitch like I did for Deoxys, I was trying to do this whole mission as authentic as possible. And what could be more authentic than a 1 weekend, 1 location trip across the country for a Pokemon? As you could probably imagine, it didn't take very long for me to convince myself to do this. Now, I'm no stranger to 17-hour road trips, trust me, but it was cheaper and quicker to fly out there, so I gave this retro game store a call just to make sure this was even real in the first place, which it was. And then I got my priorities straight and paid for a round-trip ticket to Texas for the upcoming Saturday, which was just 3 days away. I arrived at Dallas at 12 p.m. exactly, or as the natives like to say, high noon. I had about 6 hours until my flight home departed, but really that means I have about 3 or 4 to toy around with. So I took an Uber straight to the game store, and this place was absolutely packed to the brim. I've been to my fair share of retro game stores, but nothing compares to this one. So shout out to Founded Electronics in Fort Worth, Texas. I wanted to buy so many things I didn't even know I needed, but after this quick little purchase of Heart Gold, I decided it was time to inquire about the Mew event. Perhaps it was the Florida shirt or something, because they asked if I was the guy that called just a few days before. Turns out I'm a bit of a local celebrity over there. Or weirdo. Because they all wanted to thank me for making the trip out there. And honestly, by the end of the day, I was the one thanking them, because that staff was extremely helpful, knowledgeable, and honestly, the event was just a great time. The process to redeem this Mew was pretty much identical to what it was in 2004. With an open spot in your party, connect your GBA to this machine, and you get the Mystery Mew event, which was released to celebrate the movie Lucario and the Mystery of Mew. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was a little disappointed it wasn't the Faraway Island Mew, but regardless, it was what I was here for. So I cracked open my case and went through each of my Gen 3 games one by one and got multiple Mew, saving my Emerald for last. While doing this, somebody else wanted a Mew as well, and we ended up talking about a lot of in-depth Pokemon technical things. It was really cool to meet somebody in person who shared the same passion and knowledge that I had for this franchise. Well, I don't know why he was there in the first place, because it turns out he has a flashcard of his own that contains all of the events just like the store had. Maybe it was a social outing or something, but regardless, he ended up offering me the old sea map that takes me to Faraway Island. I didn't even have to ask him, literally, he just offered it to me. That's how cool of a person he is. So, shout out to Chris of Fort Worth, Texas. I had a blast talking to you, dude. It was great, and thanks again for the old sea map, seriously. After about an hour-long conversation, Chris and I finally said our goodbyes. I Ubered over to lunch real quick, then I Ubered back to the airport, and believe it or not, I was back home in Florida by bedtime. It was honestly an incredible day, and it was totally worth the experience. Unable to wait any longer, it's time I bust out that old sea map. But first, being the final Pokemon of the Pokedex, it's only fitting that I bring a team of Pokemon that helped me through the way. My Blaziken, who was my first starter when I began the mission back in August of 2023. My Alakazam, who represents the Alakazam that I lost in the incident, and my multiple playthroughs of Fire Red Leaf Green. My Japanese Swampert, who got me through an absolute breeze of a Japanese Sapphire speedrun for Celebi. My Espeon, who helped me clear through my second playthrough of Colosseum. My Latios, who, from Southern Island, represents the team I built and bred to conquer Mount Battle. And lastly, my Magneton, who represents my playthrough of XD Gale of Darkness. With the old sea map in hand, I visited the same sailor in Lily Cove City. He's probably thinking to himself, who the heck is this kid and why does he have such exclusive access to the most remote islands? Well, that's what you'd think, but he actually refuses to go to Faraway Island because, well, it's too far away, believe it or not. That's when Mr. Briny comes in and stands up for me and offers to navigate the ship safely to the distant shores where my final Pokemon remains. And so we embarked, and upon reaching the island, you can see an old faint sign with a mysterious message. Towards the center of the island, I was greeted by a curious Mew who wanted to play a game. Mew dove into the tall grass, and I had to follow its rustling movements to catch up to it. Eventually, I encountered the little guy and was able to initiate the battle. Mew knows Transform, so it did end up transforming into my Magneton, which certainly helped me make catching it a lot easier. I swore to catch this Pokemon in my favorite type of ball, the Timer Ball, and that's just what I did. And just like that, my Pokedex was complete. 386 out of 386. Not a single Pokemon left behind, a true national Pokedex. Showing this to Professor Birch was a little underwhelming because, well, he is the guy who sent me on the mission in the first place. But keep in mind this is 7 years before the introduction of the Shiny Charm, so there's really not much you can give me anyways. Taking it to Game Freak in the Cove Lily Motel results in me getting my diploma, which is honestly super cute. It features a Pikachu with a trophy and a very happy Wynot in the background. Thanks to Pokemon Box, I was able to mass transfer everything from Emerald to Leaf Green in just 2 minutes flat. This time, I went to Professor Oak, and by goodness, his reaction was 100 times better. Completely flabbergasted, the old coot lets out a big roar while doing a little dance. And if you talk to him again to check your dex after, he even gives unique dialogue now. This is a really cute detail and pretty fitting for Oak since, well, he did invent the Pokedex after all. By visiting Game Freak in Celadon City's condos, they'll award you with this diploma featuring a Pikachu and a Torchic with 2 Pecha Berries. I think I prefer the Emerald diploma more, even though I'm a big Torchic fan. So how much did this cost me anyways? Speaking in terms of time first, I spent about 541 hours across the board. It's quite a lot. I started in August of 2023, and I finished in March of 2024. Yes, it certainly was an investment of time, but wait until you hear the financials on this. I broke down every single item needed to make this video happen, and put it in a nice little list format. And then I organized by if it was absolutely necessary, not required, or if it was a production cost that I needed to make the video happen. For example, a copy of Emerald? It's required. A copy of Pokemon Box? Not so much. In the end, if somebody wanted to attempt doing it in the exact same fashion I did, but they didn't have any equipment to start with, it would cost them somewhere around $4,850. Luckily for me, I had some of the equipment to start with, but it still ended up costing me $3,510. Yeesh. If you wanted to attempt this yourself though, and you only wanted to use the items that were absolutely necessary to do it, it should cost you somewhere about $1,180, which Don't get me wrong, that's still a lot of money to beat a video game, but it's significantly less than what I paid. Regardless, I still did it. We did it. These Pokemon that I met through various journeys along the way helped me accomplish these things that I just thought I would never get to experience. Finally, I purified all 48 Pokemon in Colosseum and reached Mount Battle's summit. I got to finally experience XD Gale of Darkness after decades of sitting on my bookshelf. I got to play through an entire Pokemon game in Japanese, twice. I got to utilize and understand the infamous PubMed glitch. I finally got to witness the events on Faraway and Birth Islands. I got to view Jirachi on the fabled bonus disc. I got to meet Celebi in Agate's shrine. I got an authentic Lucky Egg in Fire Red and Leaf Green, twice. And above all, I completed the Pokédex in Generation 3. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. And as a sign of appreciation, I'd like to extend an offer to those of you who want to do this too, but can't justify the expenses to do so. If you live in the US only, unfortunately, you can send me your cartridge and I will redeem whichever Pokemon, event, or etc. you may need. For instance, if you want an authentic Wishmaker Jirachi, you'll need to send me in a copy of an English Ruby or Sapphire. If you want to receive an authentic Agate Celebi, you'll need to send me in a copy of either a Japanese Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, or Leaf Green that has entered the Hall of Fame. If you want an authentic Eon ticket item to visit Southern Island, you'll need to send me an English copy of either Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald that has entered the Hall of Fame. If you need any Pokemon to evolve by trade, simply isolate them in a PC box named Trade with any equipped items. On screen is a list of all Pokemon that evolve by trade. Again, if you live in the US only, send your cartridge to the address on screen with a note inside that specifies what it is you need redeemed. Here is an image of a sample note, so try to follow this layout. Also, please include a return label. You can check my Discord in the description and shoot me a message with any questions you might have. Obviously, this giveaway can't go on forever, so I won't be accepting any shipments beyond January 1st, 2025, or while supplies last. Thanks again everybody for watching, it means a ton, and as always, Techno's out.